Hello everybody and welcome to a new climate story. Today I want to talk about a climate denier channel and how she and her sidekick talk about one certain type of climate model. Because the arguments being made in that video are quite revealing in that they are very much in line with the arguments that most flat earthers bring about. It's the same basic storyline, the same concept. It's always the same. Lack of understanding, therefore massive Dunning-Kruger, and denial of facts without any real basis. And last but not least, bias towards favorable arguments also without or limited factual basis. But let's not jump ahead here and dissect this train wreck here piece by piece. For a start and a little context, this is a channel run by Seibt. She has a relatively large following now, at least on YouTube. I don't follow her on any other type of media, but she and her agenda has been pushed quite heavily also by a right-wing party in Germany, and she's been called since then the anti-Greta. And this video is I think the second video where she talks about climate science and how it's all basically a big lie, and she does this with her sidekick Lord Monckton. Interesting asides about this guy: he is no real lord. As far as I know, lordship has to be earned, and he is not allowed to call himself lord. Anyway, he was a second or third row politician back in the Thatcher era, so he's a true conservative, so to speak, anti-EU, of course, and he has been lobbying against the anthropogenic climate change science for the last, 15 or 20 years maybe. Another interesting aside, which is of course a total coincidence, is that he has connections to the Heartland Institute, which is a conservative think tank in the US, mostly funded by big oil companies. And by another totally unrelated coincidence, Seibt was in fact working for the Heartland Institute for a couple of months, which she wants to kind of keep on the down low and never really talks about it anymore. I wonder why that is. So that's just to ballpark what kind of people we are dealing with here. Both, of course, have no real scientific background. But let's just start off the video here and see how Monckton is luring us into his argument.
It is. And no, Naomi, we don't need models. All we need is real-world data. We know, by measurement, that from 1850 to 2020, there's been about 0.9 degrees of global warming, which isn't much.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause right here. So this far, the data that he stated is all correct. Whether or not that is not much is not something that you just shrug off with a half sentence. To just say that without any evidence is, at least for me, factual dishonesty. But it gets better.
3.45 watts per square meter. Now, the extra radiation caused by all of our activities and all the changes to greenhouse gases, land use, deforestation since 1850 is about 2.9 watts per square meter. But 0.8 of that 2.9 hasn't yet caused any warming, because the vast heat capacity of the ocean causes a delay in the warming coming through. Now, if we multiply 0.9 degrees by the ratio of the 3.45 watts per square meter CO2 forcing to the 2.1 watts per square meter of man-made forcing since 1850 that has caused warming to date, we can work out just how much warming a doubling of the CO2 in the air will cause. And you'll see these figures on the slide here. And the warming will be about 1.5 degrees per CO2.
Notice how he kind of threw all these numbers. I've gotten confused by that. I don't know if that's true for you. So let's just take a deep breath here and dissect this piece by piece, and let's not rush through the numbers. So I have here the actual paper that they are citing in their video, and it is a standard scientific paper. It went through the standard peer review process. It is properly published. Nothing fishy about this here. Now, the reason why these two authors published that paper is they wanted to present a model, and this is important, estimate the equilibrium climate sensitivity, ECS, and the transient climate response, TCR. And they use for their model the data from the 5th IPCC report, AR5. They only use parts of that data, but we will get to that in a little bit. The key point that they are trying to make is linear relationship between those two factors, the ECS and the TCR. That in itself is all fine and dandy. In science, you can do that. You can make assumptions, you can make propositions, and it gets discussed. That's not the key issue that I have with the video of Seibt and Monckton here. But I want to give you a little context here. So what does equilibrium climate sensitivity mean? The ECS is a value that you can calculate to estimate how warm the global climate will be when we double the CO2 in the atmosphere. And the transient climate response, TCR, kind of tries to estimate how we get to that state of equilibrium. This is the tricky part here, or the real interesting part, because as you can see here, the climate sensitivity is not linear. It depends on surface albedo, so how much snow there is on the earth, how reflective the earth is, and many other factors, how the climate will react to an increase in CO2 to reach the equilibrium climate sensitivity state. You'll notice this formula. That's exactly what Seibt and Monckton show in their video. This is the formula from the Curry and Lewis paper. A lot of assumptions are going into these variables here. It's the assumption that Monckton briefly touched upon, the oceanic uptake, and it's the assumption how the climate is going to react to CO2 increase. So again, this paper is assuming that there's a linear relationship, or that there's going to be a linear relationship with CO2 increase in the climate. We have not seen this in the past, but it could be. In scientific terms, when we talk about the pure science and the assumptions that this paper makes, it can very well be that in the future, in the years to come, the climate is going to change linearly with CO2 increase. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that is not what those two are actually saying in their video. They are going to say, and they are going to make the argument quite aggressively, that this is actual, factual, already measured data, which is bullcrap. Again, the Lewis and Curry paper is a model. It's a very simple model that comes out at 1.5 degrees. There are many other models that also come out at 1.5 degrees that are not so simple, and there are other models that come out at 4.5 degrees. That is all in the IPCC report. There's nothing being lied about here, or nothing secret going on. The main point is that this is a model. It's a prediction of the future.
Real world warming since 1990 has been less than half what the UN's climate panel predicted that year. They predicted it confidently. The modelers have paid no attention to their previous failures. In 1990 they predicted 3 degrees warming from doubled CO2. Now they predict 4.1 degrees instead of the 1.5 degrees that measurement shows they should predict.
All those models are predicting a range of possible temperatures. They are not predicting one specific temperature, as Monckton tries to suggest here. And also, this 1.5 degrees is not real measurement, because it's a assumption, an estimation of the future. It cannot be measured yet. That's why we have models. But Monckton here is trying to suggest that the formula that he presented before is actual, real, already measured data, which is not and cannot be the case. So he's just lying there. Since 1979 up to now, the increase in temperature corresponds to a linear line here with a slope of 1.5 degrees. This segment here, from 79 to 2010, I think. And yeah, we can make a linear correlation here, but what about the rest here? And sure enough, if we plot the 1.5, or in this case it's 1.6 degree linear slope over the temperature range from 1879 to 2020, that correlation doesn't look so good anymore. And that's just one example of a model that better fits the data that we've collected, the historical data. Now, there is an argument. Do we actually need such a complex model, or does the linear fit work just as well? So in other words, are those wiggles that we see, especially in 1940 and also around 1900, are those just chaotic fluctuations that don't really change the basic trend? Is the basic trend actually at 1.5 degrees? Question mark. And that is a valid question to make. That is actually being discussed in the climate modeling community. But what are Naomi and Monckton making out of this? Well, let's have a look.
You know what I find truly astonishing? The fact that we don't derive our knowledge about climate sensitivity from real-world data, but rather from silly little computer games, so you can't call it knowledge at all.
Regurgitating the idea that the Lewis and Curry model that comes out at 1.5 degrees is not a model, which is of course bullshit.
Christopher, you have not only shown how simple it is to calculate how much global warming we may cause, but also how one can check if your calculation is right. And it is spot on. What you've just proven is that climate models that cannot even predict the weather a week from now cannot predict the longer term climate either.
The last part about the prediction of the models is just the icing on the cake. So I'm just going to let Monckton here ramble on a bit, and then I'm going to make my final assessment here.
The problem, Naomi, is this. They can tweak any sufficiently complex model to get any result they want. And it's profitable for the modelers to predict large warming. But their predictions have failed.
Profitable, you say? You silly little twat. Modelers are scientists. They do not make money for making their models more and more complex. That's just silly. And this cannot be stressed enough. As a scientist, you prove yourself wrong constantly. And you prove your models wrong. That is what science is. And believe me, I've been in the field for 10 years. It is hard. But again, it's necessary because of one simple reason. Scientists want to learn more about our world. And so if a model does not help us learn more about our world, then it gets discarded. Simple as that.
Exaggeratedly large warming that they predicted isn't happening. So if all we want to know is how much warming we may cause, models are pointless. The real world data is enough, and it shows beyond any reasonable doubt that the warming that we may cause will be small, harmless, net beneficial, good for us, good for our fellow creatures on this planet, good for plant life, good for the planet as a whole.
That specific paper that they're on about never says the changing climate is going to be small, harmless, and even beneficial. They never say that. This douchebag does. Right here, staring us in the face. And there's no scientific evidence for that. That is why he's not even citing anything right there, because it's just crap. The increase in CO2 has so many detrimental factors coming with it that we see right now. It's stable and we have more weather extremes, then the higher CO2 isn't beneficial for the plants. It doesn't help them anymore to have CO2 when they don't have any water anymore. I don't know what to say anymore. This is just bull crap that he's pulling out there. And I can't believe that anybody is actually believing this nonsense. So let's see what Little Miss Sunshine has to say here, and then we'll wrap up.
Climate models are not only pointless, they are very deceptive, and they will continue to try to mislead us with even more ridiculous factors to boost the climate sensitivity artificially, because as we can see from real-world data, there has not been as much of a temperature change as they predicted. So we should adjust the factors that they used in those climate models. But what they did instead is they increased the estimates for the climate sensitivity, which makes no sense at all.
Right, so nothing new from Little Miss Sunshine. So I think we can wrap this train wreck up here. I hope this was a little... I hope that you got a little information out of that and that you had a little fun watching these two goofballs. If you had, please click the like and subscribe button. If you have any comments, questions, please leave them in the comment section. I would love to read them. Until then, take care. Bye.